What can AI never know about accessibility, no matter how advanced it gets?
As AI evolves, it likely will, get superhuman powers.
Which accessibility jobs are going to disappear because of AI?
Yeah, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. I'm optimistic because,
Why are accessibility professionals underpaid?
yeah, that's
What are the most common mistakes a tester can make when they are using AI?
we have to not just take it as being 100% what it is.
If someone who is starting as a fresher in accessibility, how can they trust those results?
And so, first off, you have to understand the limitations of AI.
How can they learn about AI?
There's a lot of great resources out there in the accessibility community. I think that,
What are the three AI tools that you would suggest for testers?
wow, well, I don't, I don't know if I have exactly three AI tools.
What accessibility decisions must always remain with humans?
That's a good question.
One last piece of advice that you would love to give to our testers and developers who are worried about AI in accessibility. A lot of accessibility testers and developers are asking the same question. What is AI about to do to my job? Not in 2 years and not in theory, but right now. And instead of clear answers, they are getting hype, tools, demos, and a lot of false confidence. That's why today's guest is different. I'm joined by Jon Avila, Chief Accessibility Officer at Level Access. Jon has spent over 20 years in the accessibility space, and not just testing or consulting, but helping shape the rules themselves. He's an invited expert who contributes directly to WCAG guidelines, the standards that we all use today. So today's conversation is not about AI demos. This conversation is about what AI can realistically help with accessibility. Which parts of accessibility work cannot be automated, and how testers and developers can upskill themselves. So if you build and test applications and you're wondering whether AI is about to replace you or redefine your role, then this conversation is for you. Hey Jon, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. For those of you who don't know, Jon and I have been connected with each other over 4 or 5 years. We have a lot of fruitful conversations related to accessibility, what are the new trends, and how we are taking accessibility to the next level. So, this podcast is dedicated to the AI, how AI is going to shape the future of accessibility. Jon, most of our viewers are actually newbies or having 1 to 3 years of experience in accessibility. So, what does AI in accessibility truly means in the real world accessibility?
Oh, that's such a broad topic. Uh, AI has a lot of potential in the area of assistive technology to help people with disabilities. AI has impacts to people with disabilities because it's used in so many places in business, such as hiring and employment. It also has impacts for the accessibility industry for people who work in accessibility or who want to make their things accessible, because AI has the potential to make a big difference, but also can, if used improperly, could impact the user experience of people with disabilities.
Mhm. And if I may have to ask you, Jon, how does AI in accessibility means for a tester?
Yeah, so I think it certainly in the future will change how we test.
Mhm.
And it's not like today you can't just say, oh, I'm going to ask a foundation model, like a large language model, LLM. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to drop in a bunch of accessibility questions and it's going to do an audit for me.
Mhm.
There's lots of false positives. It has trouble with certain things, um, but it's still AI is constantly evolving and rapidly changing and really doubling in speed all the time. So
Mhm.
that will quickly evolve. And so how we use it in the testing process will evolve and be able to really scale accessibility. In my perspective, we always will need humans in the loop, humans involved with accessibility, but the degree that we have to be involved will be less, but we'll be able to help many more people with accessibility, and so we'll be able to scale our efforts and make a larger impact.
I believe, as you said, John, it's still evolving. There are a lot of nuances involved, how it will shape the accessibility testing piece and how it's going to benefit testers and not scare them off. What accessibility problems do we have today which AI can solve?
So there's two AI solutions, I guess. One is AI can help you identify issues when you're building and creating things. It can also help you when you're in the ideation and planning stages. So it can help you think about accessibility then. And then from a testing standpoint, it can help you during your testing process and help you provide guidance and remediation advice, and then also potentially even correct code in development or potentially post source as well. So there's lots of different areas. But if you just think about like testing capabilities, and you were to just use some of the off-the-shelf things today, it would be able to do things like make sure the language identified in the page matches the language on the page. That's something that it's good at, is detecting language, and it can match that language tag. It could also look at the link text within a paragraph and tell you, does that link text describe the purpose of the link with the rest of the paragraph? Can do some things like looking at a heading and saying, does this heading accurately describe the section below it? Those types of things are easy wins that can be done today, and there's others as well. But it's it's still evolving, and so how you integrate some of this AI checks into your processes are the things that are critical, because you don't want to increase false positives. You don't want to create more noise, right? When an automated tool isn't accurate enough, or flags the wrong things, or isn't consistent, then the challenge is then it's actually not helpful. And so how can you make sure that it's repeatable, that it's scalable, and that you are providing advice that's beyond just junior or beginner advice. And so like today, when I use some of the technologies that are just out of the box, they tend to sometimes give good advice, and sometimes they get things confused. Just like a new person to the field might, or a junior person to the field might not have that level of expertise, and they get some concepts confused, and they make some recommendations that may not be ideal, simply because they've been trained on data that might not be ideal. For example, sometimes technology might advise using ARIA label rather than actually just changing the name of a button. Just changing the text, which would be a better solution. Or so with training and proper data sets, and with human feedback in the loop back to the AI to evolve it, and being able to learn off of good design systems and good code bases that include accessibility, the potential and the ability is much higher.
Yeah, that's a good insight, John. Now, we all know there are around 87 success criteria under WCAG 2.2. Among those, John, what can AI never know about accessibility, no matter how advanced it gets?
Well, that's a good question, and I think as AI evolves, it likely will get superhuman powers, and so I'm not sure where the limits are to where the technology can go. I think there's a lot of potential, but of course, it's not there. It's still evolving, and so there's a lot of things you can do today, but there's things that are not within today's reach. And so, I think maybe that's more of the question, is like today, where are the limitations?
Mm-hmm.
Just like I think from a holistic experience, um, some of those the experience of the user. I think it's totally possible to understand how screen readers work on web pages because that's a very defined thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think AI has the potential to be able to understand some aspects of a screen reader user in terms of what the user would be presented, what the user wouldn't be presented, because we've had there's some extensions and stuff out there that show you what a screen reader sees. There's
Mm-hmm.
like programs like JAWS and Spec which show you what a screen reader sees. So, but but that's just like the accessibility structure and the presentation. Overall, there's different perspectives of like
Mm-hmm.
a holistic perspective of like, okay, um, these things are repetitive or multiple low severity issues can impact the user's um, frustration or
Mm-hmm.
how long it takes to perform a task. So there was a company who was presenting some research once, and we were discussing um, buttons, and when buttons lacked
Mm-hmm.
a signifier that they were a button, like a border.
Yeah.
Um, and they were doing some research, and they said, well, with our test with low vision folks, low vision people were able to find those buttons on that screen,
Mm-hmm.
just like a fully sighted person. And so it doesn't matter if there's a signifier for the
Mm-hmm.
button, like a border or background color change or anything like, because they can still find them.
Mm-hmm.
But what came to my mind as a person with low vision was, well, how long did it take the person to find those buttons, and
Mm-hmm.
were they exhausted after
Yeah.
trying to locate them? And the response is, well, we didn't test that, we didn't record that,
Yeah.
so we didn't track that. So we don't know if it took them 10 times as long to find the button, or that after they found it, it was fatiguing. Like, those are other factors that impact humans. That holistic experience of going through a journey, those little things. I think that's something that'll be very, much more difficult to solve
Mm-hmm.
with AI. And maybe it can in the future, but today, those experiences are still um, something that we need to consider and have humans in the loop with, to really understand the impact of people using the technology, because ultimately, um, in the future, I think technology will use technology, but humans still
Mm-hmm.
ultimately need to interact with technology at some level, even if all the AI agents are talking to each other and doing a lot of things and removing human from some aspects. There is still some interface that humans are going to need to interface with, and that's
Mm-hmm.
going to need to work for everybody for this to be successful.
John, when you were talking about screen readers and AI, I was playing with JAWS 2026 version, wherein they have something called as AI labelers. So if your buttons or links are missing accessible names, they have a shortcut. Once you press it, it enables or it creates an accessible name for you. Do you see those kind of improvements coming forward with other screen readers as well?
So for a long time, VoiceOver on the iPhone has had some capabilities like that, where it
Mm-hmm.
can use optical character recognition, which, many of that's using AI as well. It could look at the screen text, look at what's visible, and
Mm-hmm.
speak a label to the user.
Okay.
Um, and so, and it even has iOS with VoiceOver. It even has like a screen feature where it can not just identify the text controls that might be missing, but also identify information on the screen as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges I have is with like short form videos, right? So you're watching a video, um, and it has text in the video, and that text is sort of built into the video, and so it's small. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
enlarge, um, And if it does enlarge, then of course it blocks the video, so you can't see what's going on in the video. Say if you have low vision. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've played around trying to get VoiceOver to work in those environments, to sort of read me the text as it's changing. And it doesn't do a great job, but it shows a lot of promise of that visual, I guess, automatic AI audio description or visual interpreting or whatever you want to call it. It does show quite a bit of promise on helping people with low vision experience social media and short form videos in a more accessible way by helping them understand what's going on and what text is on the screen.
John, you might have also experienced it internally to your team. Whenever we use the word AI, there is a sense of fear. Are they coming for your job? So, and as I said at the beginning of our podcast, most of our audience are either trying to get into accessibility or have an experience of 1 to 3 years. For someone watching, John, which accessibility jobs are going to disappear because of AI?
Yeah, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. I think so far, like broadly speaking, it hasn't impacted as much as people fear. I'm optimistic because to me it's a scale issue. Like if you think about like some of the WebAIM million
Mm-hmm.
survey they did of 1 million homepages, and 95% had accessibility issues.
Mm-hmm.
To me, we have not been able to fix. We've made great progress over the last 20, 30 years, but we haven't been able to solve the problem to make websites accessible to everybody, just as an industry. The industry
Mm-hmm.
as a whole hasn't been able to reach everybody because there are people who don't have the funds, or because the site was created in a certain way and is old, or there's lots of reasons, or lack of awareness, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been able to reach those people. But I think with the technology, we'll be able to reach a much broader audience, the small businesses, the folks who haven't been able to pay for the human tester. Manual testing takes time,
Mm-hmm.
and with time is cost, because people need to be fairly compensated for their work. People with disabilities who are doing testing need to be fairly compensated. And so I see it as an opportunity for us to perhaps reach more people with
Mm-hmm.
even though maybe we won't have to do as much on each
Mm-hmm.
bit of work. Humans can focus on the complex issues. Humans can focus on the nuances. Humans can reach more people. So I look at it that direction rather than saying, there won't be a need at all.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the future is going to be, but I do have some, I'm optimistic. But certainly things will be changing, and there will be a lot of exciting things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you could say this about anything. Here's the thing, like if in the future we're using virtual worlds, and I think ultimately in the future we will be hanging out more in virtual worlds,
Mm-hmm.
no amount of team of people is going to be able to make those virtual worlds accessible. It's just not plausible. Instead of saying, well, then that's cutting back on the folks who could have jobs. If we can use AI to be able to make those virtual worlds accessible to more people,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's a win for people with disabilities, because the technology is evolving, and in the future, well, things aren't going to be just so limited to the user interfaces that we're used to today.
Mm-hmm.
Just like eventually we'll probably be moving to neural interfaces where
Mm-hmm.
people who are comfortable with that will be interfacing directly with technology through their brains.
Yeah,
And so it is going to have a profound impact on
sure.
positive, and also there's risks. Like if you probably read some books like Ready Player One and Two, and some of those things that talk about the
Mm-hmm.
future of those, and what could happen.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's I don't want to predict, but I
yeah.
think the way I look at it today is we're sort of, I know this people are like, well, we're training AI to sort of take away our jobs. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we're training AI to create better content. And that better content that's more accessible will help people. And we're helping to build technology that will make things more accessible in the future to people. Um, and so ultimately, from a perspective of helping people with disabilities, whatever we can do to provide more access is the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ideally, if there was no accessibility issues and we didn't need accessibility folks, that would be that would be great. And it's not, like, we only we're doing this work not because we're doing it because there's a need and a gap,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the way I personally look at it.
During this session, during this podcast, John, you mentioned about AI using large language models which are not having accessible solutions, right? To me, it's like we are using AI to speed up our development, but in the process, we are building more inaccessible solutions. And more inaccessible solution means more demand for accessibility experts. So, as long as you are upskilling yourself, how you can use AI to fasten your testing and then focus on high impact areas like screen reader testing, use case testing, I believe there is a good chance to sustain for next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that sometimes AI is using incorrect data to build new things, because then
Mm-hmm.
we're just perpetuating the problem. Like, ideally, we want the content that's created to be created accessible from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree that we can help with that, um, then that has a lot of potential. And maybe that's making sure there's the models are trained on better data, more
Mm-hmm.
accessible code, more accessible designs. Um, that we give that feedback to the technology so it can make those
Yeah.
adjustments appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And so our work may shift. I mean, in the future, we may be focusing on how to train the data, how to make those
Mm-hmm.
progress, or make those improvements in the code, um, because it is just fixing things after the fact is like not addressing things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think ultimately for the folks that are concerned, um, everything has shifted in the last. Just looking at my experience in the last 30 years. So when I started in the industry, I was in assistive technology. I was customizing screen readers to make them work with software used on job sites by people who were blind, low vision. So I would
Mm-hmm.
come in, I would configure JAWS, I would write custom scripts to make it speak a button's name when there was no name on the button, much like you're talking about with AI.
Yeah.
And um, and so I could have looked at that situation and said, well, fixing code is going to take away my customers.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't look at it like that. I looked at it, I'm doing one-off accommodations. This isn't scalable because I can't reach everybody who needs a
Mm-hmm.
job. And so how can we help people get employed that have disabilities? The best way we can do that is helping people prevent issues in the first place. And so while that means the job scripting and the accommodations that we used to do, we don't, I don't do that anymore. There's
Mm-hmm.
not as big need for that, but because things are being built accessible. So my job shifted, but it
Mm-hmm.
still has, even more impact.
And during your conversation, John, you touched upon a very sensitive topic of fairly compensated. The biggest complaint that I hear is why are accessibility professionals underpaid? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. I think many are fairly paid, but in some areas they're not. And certainly, globally, this is uh, inconsistent in how folks are compensated.
Mm-hmm.
People. Just my experience. Sometimes companies will expect people with disabilities to give them feedback for free. We're helping you, so you should give us feedback. And people with disabilities should give feedback to companies. But at the same time, if you're providing your time as a service, you need to be compensated for what you're providing
Mm-hmm.
to companies. And so I think the companies that are seeing it as we're doing something for you should really see accessibility as one, good for business, and whether they're selling software to other businesses or whether they're selling to customers, it's good for their business. It's improving their user experience. It's
Mm-hmm.
providing value. It's also legally required in most places,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just a perspective that they have. They may not have the right perspective on why accessibility is important
Mm-hmm.
and the value that it provides, just like they would pay for any other service that
Yeah.
provides value to their company.
Coming back to our AI conversation, right? In today's world, are we really using AI to improve accessibility? Or is it just a buzzword we want to use for our companies as well to be legally safe?
Yeah. So in the past, just in general, people have used AI as a buzzword for features and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
and they really haven't been that AI based. They've been more rule based, or there's some AI, but it doesn't rise to the level of what you might expect. Um, I think that's rapidly changing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are finding ways to use AI more and more, and for it to actually be providing more value. And just thinking about like some of the things with VoiceOver and iOS that I use, the Meta glasses, as an example, with visual interpreting,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those things, Be My Eyes, and some of the technology. It is. It may not be where it needs to be yet, but it's making a lot of progress. It has so much potential to be very useful and very changing. Like just as a person with visual impairment going to a museum,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenges that you have in accessing those environments. And yes, there should be tactile models, and there's some great examples of those. And yes, there should be tours with audio description. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but practically speaking, like if you try to go to a museum and you try to and you just want an audio description of something, say at the
Mm-hmm.
Louvre, and
Yeah.
and like just finding your way around and just knowing what pictures are available, all those things are still really inaccessible today. And
Mm-hmm.
and we have the technology to fix a lot of those issues, but it's the scale, the reach, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not to say that museums aren't doing something.
Yeah.
They are, but I think it's the reach is just not. It's still very difficult for a
Mm-hmm.
person with a visual impairment to be able to access many of those mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And but AI really has the power to be that individual interpreter, visual interpreter, who
Mm-hmm.
can help you locate things, who can describe what you're looking at, who can make those connections, who understand
Mm-hmm.
your personal needs. So it's really exciting where the technology
Mm-hmm.
is going, and so I've seen a lot of promise, I guess, is what I've seen, and so I'm optimistic that it will solve some of the challenges that just we haven't been able to solve at scale previously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, John. And when we talk about AI, the assumption is it's going to give you the right answer, and we always fall victim of the hallucination results that we get from AI, right? So my question is related to that.
Yeah.
What are the most common mistakes a tester can make when they are using AI?
Yeah, if you're looking at a lot of the off-the-shelf things, you really do have to double check things, sources,
Mm-hmm.
um, even the user impact. I've seen AI get confused with, and I've seen humans get confused on the same thing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Sometimes we say AI has these problems. AI can't, hasn't always written good alternative text, but humans haven't
Mm-hmm.
written very good alternative text either. I've seen very poorly written human text. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge. So I think we do have to review what AI is proposing. We have to not just take it as being 100% what it is. So whether it's the user impact or the code recommendations, um, but as we train things, as we give feedback to AI, I have seen a lot of improvement over time. And so I think it's using it when appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
using it when it's providing value, use it to speed up your processes. Um, it is helpful. It is very helpful in some ways. Um, if you are reporting, for example, does seem pretty, um, the off-the-shelf stuff seems pretty good at helping people to summarize their findings and
Mm-hmm.
to help report on issues and help provide some guidance. But you do
Mm-hmm.
have to review that. So I do just looking at some sites and putting some stuff into just playing around. um, I have found it helpful
Mm-hmm.
in helping summarize and communicate. So it's good at certain tasks right now, but in the
Mm-hmm.
future it will be. I think we will be using it in many different aspects than what we're today.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of potential. So much of it has to be done correctly, like the prompting, like how you prompt and what you feed it with. If you give it just a generic um, like a rule or test,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't give it the correct guidance, you're not going to get very good. It's like garbage in, garbage out. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to
Mm-hmm.
get what you need. But if you can be very prescriptive in how to test, what are the steps, what it needs, you can get much better responses out of it. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to invest the time in using it, you also want to make sure you are investing the time into properly setting it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And on those lines, John, how can a tester learn about right prompting?
Yes. Um, I'm not an expert in the area of prompting, but there's many
Mm-hmm.
articles which can provide guidance on how to test, what to look for,
Mm-hmm.
where to look. It Some of these things, it has sort of built-in knowledge about many things,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it needs the
Mm-hmm.
right steps and the right wording to get the right results. Um, and so I don't have a specific resource on
Mm-hmm.
that, but I would say in some ways it's almost like if you were to give a human the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What we did, like WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, some of the criteria appear very vague. Like
Mm-hmm.
the information and relationships are communicated through that are communicated through presentation also have to have be available in text or programmatically. Well, what does
Mm-hmm.
that mean? It's a very broad a tester. If you just gave them that test, they wouldn't know what to do. But
Yeah.
when you start to break that down, okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that headings need to be marked as a heading, and headings have to have a certain order based on the visual headings on the page. And so when you start breaking those pieces down into individual tests, much like
Mm-hmm.
many of the test methodologies do, and then when you have very prescriptive test steps,
Yeah.
it's just like you would do with a person if you were training them on accessibility testing. Use this tool. Look for this. If it's this, it passes. If it's this, it fails. Like
Mm-hmm.
starting to have very prescriptive
Yeah.
things can be one way of assisting the technology. But I think it's very similar to how we have trained humans as well.
Yeah, so I was playing with multiple GPT models, John, and I intentionally asked the wrong question for accessibility. And I was very strict with my prompting, saying adhere and look only to WCAG 2.2 AA conformance levels. Different models gave me different results, and all of them were
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
So, if someone who is starting as a fresher in accessibility and has heard about AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, you name it, right? How can they trust those results?
yeah. And it's also, if you ask them to tell you what you need to test, a lot of times the AI will just give you a very short list, a brief list
Yeah.
of things. It won't. And so, one, you have to, and maybe a brief list is a good place to start, but it's not conformance to the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first off, you have to understand like the limitations of AI. And so you need to make sure, what is the full list of things I need to be testing for or building for, thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're actually testing, you need to be able to almost put it back. You almost need to put it back into the AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I kind of think about it. Like if an AI could either miss something, that's a false negative. So it doesn't report on it and it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And then, of course, you don't know. So you could run it through multiple models, like you said
Mm-hmm.
you did. Of course, if they're all wrong or all having trouble, then that's maybe that test isn't a good candidate right now
Mm-hmm.
for testing purposes. But if you can find other criteria or break them down into smaller tests, and you can find a smaller test that works, and you can consistently prove that it works across multiple models, or you find a model where it's really consistent, then maybe that's a test. So it's really this hybrid approach of using AI, automated tools, manual
Mm-hmm.
tools, humans, technology to do that work. In the future, more and more of that work will be done by AI as it improves.
Mm-hmm.
AI will be our teammates in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a process, and just like any other field, whether you're an engineer or a designer. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's sort of the same challenges of, how we use the tools, how we rely on them, and getting feedback from real people can help you know
Mm-hmm.
where you can rely on them and where you need to intervene.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And John, there is one word which is always linked when we talk about people with disabilities or accessibility in general is empathy. How do you foresee AI either improving the empathy aspect or is it going to completely remove it?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting conversation because empathy is really at the individual. Some people have more empathy and some people don't. And sometimes you can't change some people. Some people you can change through explaining to them and letting them experience. So I think that's one of the challenges. Sometimes people don't understand the impact to a person with a disability. They tend to think that things are better than they are. They tend to
Mm-hmm.
think, well, we followed the framework, we designed this well, it should work. They don't have the perspective of a person with a disability, and so they don't know that those issues exist because they just don't have that. But if you
Mm-hmm.
can demonstrate it to them, if you can show that to them, then they can be persuaded that yes, that I didn't realize, I thought it was better. I didn't realize these challenges were actually blockers and preventing someone from accessing that. There's
Mm-hmm.
other people who can explain that and they don't, it doesn't change them, or they don't, doesn't care. I think AI will be able to, I think it's more of a scale thing. Again, we haven't been able to make everybody aware of access. We haven't been able to demonstrate the challenges that
Mm-hmm.
people face on people's sites. And if we can just, if the sites can be accessible, if the apps can be accessible, if the experiences can be accessible, um, then we don't have to convince people of why it's necessary to do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should be accessibility should be and empathy should be part of our education in
Mm-hmm.
general. It should be um, part of all, what we're doing in the classroom and wherever. But to the degree that we can remove those barriers
Mm-hmm.
so they're not problems, I think we would still be ideal, even if we can do those things. And then I think it's really going to scale that
Mm-hmm.
experience. And if we make things available, people might find they actually really like them. Like captions are a great example of something that was created for people with disabilities, people who are deaf or
Mm-hmm.
hard of hearing, but people really love captions,
Yeah.
even if they don't need them. And so the same thing with other modes like dark mode
Mm-hmm.
um, or other things. So I think if we can show the value of these accessibility features, other people will see how they're really helpful to them. So I always say like it's beneficial to helpful to it's beneficial to all, but it's necessary for some. And just as
Mm-hmm.
long as we can, um, if people know that some of those features aren't just nice to haves,
Mm-hmm.
that are actually necessary for some, then and just knowing that perspective
Mm-hmm.
can be really helpful. But again, it's something that's hard to teach. I find that companies that have personal connection to disability much more in the leadership tend to be much more driven to want to fix accessibility issues because they have experienced that disability in
Mm-hmm.
their family or whatever it might be. And so they are much more interested in solving those issues because they know the impact that it has on accessing things.
Mm-hmm. Two interesting points from this answer of yours, John. One, we do not teach about empathy and accessibility in our schools. Do you see that trend changing?
I think as we build accessibility checkers into things, I think it does bring some awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Microsoft has done a lot to build accessibility checkers into their products. So nowadays, you when you're building a presentation or a document, it can prompt you for those things. It can tell you
Mm-hmm.
those things are missing. I would even love to see a feature that when you turn it on shows you the experience of that person. So if something is low contrast and you turn on the low vision profile, it goes
Mm-hmm.
away and you're like, wow, it's gone. I can't even see that now. So
Yeah.
now you understand, you get that perspective of oh wow, my classmate who has
Mm-hmm.
low vision, this might not even be visible to them.
Yeah.
And so it could really be impactful. Again, like the challenge with empathy is how you don't want people to pity people. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
them to say, "Oh, wow, this must be terrible." Um, it's always a balance of this
Mm-hmm.
awareness. How do you get people to be aware, understand the impact, but understand that disability is diversity,
Yeah.
and people many people are proud to be disabled and their disability defines them, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a bad thing, or and so it's just something that requires an environment that supports their needs, and
Mm-hmm.
so we do have to help communicate that nuance to
Yeah.
people so they don't get the wrong impression.
The second point, John, was related to having people with disabilities into the leadership roles. Another misconception the people have is we are trying to promote people who are not competent enough.
Mhm.
So, if you want to clarify via this podcast what you really meant by that.
Yeah, that's a really tricky situation. So I think organizations can't really sell to diverse populations and create user interfaces for diverse populations if they don't represent that population themselves. So the organization has to have people with disabilities, just like they have to
Mm-hmm.
have other people with other diversity in their organization to really be able to create products that work for diverse audiences and truly be a good experience. And so that diversity of opinion and thought and ability and so forth is really important for business, and it provides it gets away from groupthink. That there's people who think differently and who think outside of the box, to use a cliche, but
Mm-hmm.
that's important, and it's important at all levels of the organization, um, whether it's the senior leadership or middle management or the individual contributor.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that that reflects the organization, is reflected of the customers and what they do. And I think that the biggest challenge with that is people, they don't think about their customers with disabilities. They look at someone and someone might not appear to have a disability, and so they assume they're
Mm-hmm.
not disabled. Um, they don't know all the situations where their customers use their products in different environments, or the different environments they might be shopping in,
Yeah.
whether it may be outside or on a mobile device or on a smart speaker, or like they're not thinking about all those things, and so their perspective is like, oh well, um, this is something we sort of have to do,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's pushback towards it. So instead of seeing it as a positive thing that actually helps business to be stronger, they see it as a
Mm-hmm.
mandate that goes against what they're doing. So
Yeah.
it's not it's just it's the perception,
Mm-hmm.
has a that is the challenge, not the actual practicality. And I think there's other things. This is a complex issue though, because if hiring practices in a company don't support hiring with people with disabilities, then you don't see coworkers with disabilities because um, you don't see them because they're not in the
Mm-hmm.
company. Um, I've experienced companies just over my long career. I've seen companies use all sorts of excuses to be concerned about hiring a person with a disability. And it's just, it's like the perceptions of people with disabilities are sometimes the challenge. Like, well, we can't hire a blind programmer because we can't assist him in him getting his lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, why does, like, just off the wall, excuses where people think, oh, well, this thing, maybe they're convinced that this person is good at their job, but then there's these other things. Oh, well, we can't help him do this or her, because their perceptions of people with disabilities are
Mm-hmm.
clouded by bias or whatever. And so the people don't get the opportunity, then they don't get promoted, and you don't see people with disabilities represented in those senior leadership
Mm-hmm.
roles.
Thanks to Section 508 and ADA, I believe this trend is now changing.
Yeah, it certainly is. Of course, with technology, we just have to make sure that the new technology, new AI tools
Mm-hmm.
don't impact that. Like, for example, if AI screens out a person who is not making eye contact, if they screen
Mm-hmm.
them out, then they won't even get the ability
Yeah.
to present themselves to the employer. So
True.
we just have to make sure that we understand where AI or where bias can be introduced
Mm-hmm.
into the process, and make sure there's something to combat that or address that, or whatever it is to solve that
Yeah.
problem. Because technology is always going to be doing that. There's always going to be a
Mm-hmm.
simulator or some exercise that isn't accessible,
Yeah.
and has the potential to block
Mm-hmm.
a person, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So it's always going to be a balance, right? How AI can improve, rather than impacting the users with disabilities. Okay.
It's something we continually have to think about. We've
Yeah.
made a lot of progress. The laws are there and have made a difference. Of course, it's also
Mm-hmm.
enforcement of the law. The
Yeah.
law is only as good as the enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's many great employers who really do a great job and truly are committed to hiring people with disabilities, and recognizing them and purchasing from those companies because they're
Mm-hmm.
doing the right thing is important.
Sure, sure. John, if we have to empower our new generations of testers and developers, how can they learn about AI, which is directly related to the accessibility field?
There's a lot of great resources out there in the accessibility community. I think that what I really like about the accessibility community is people really want to help other people,
Mm-hmm.
teach other people, spread the awareness and knowledge. And so there's folks that have written articles on it. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about the technology, lots of free webinars, that type of thing. But it's also good just to play around with it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned doing that and trying things and see what works. Don't always just fall into what other people are saying. Try something out for yourself to see how it really works and discover and build something new that can help other people. So I think there's a lot of potential there. There's some features and like Copilot now with you can
Mm-hmm.
create your own agent. So you could create your own accessibility agent, your mini me to help you.
Yeah.
There's those accessibility notebook features where you can put good examples in, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll use those resources that you've curated in helping provide you answers for future questions.
Yeah.
So it's just using some of the stuff that's available to sort of refine and sort of build your own tools can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of ways to improve, but there's definitely community with IAAP, which is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Obviously, they're thinking about the profession and how technology
Mm-hmm.
is impacting the future of the profession. There's accessibility Slack channels and so forth. So definitely take advantage of those things, ask questions, and be curious about how to solve new problems.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the AI tools, John, what are the three AI tools that you would suggest for testers?
Wow. Well, I don't know if I have exactly three AI
Mm-hmm.
tools to suggest, um, but um, but I would start by looking at things that take a long time today to solve. What are the things that are difficult? What takes the longest to do today? What are the and look there. And the second one is look at the repetitive tasks that you're doing. What are the things that are repetitive that take you a long time that are the same thing over and over again? That would be great for AI to solve those things. So whether it's writing up findings or creating a VPAT report, right? Like what are those
Mm-hmm.
repetitive things? Um, and then and then maybe what are some of the things that that you see where could use improvement,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe it's difficult to catch everything or missing things, or maybe the advice you're giving isn't as good as it could
Mm-hmm.
be. How can you use AI to sort of make efficiencies in those things? So I'm always thinking about using technology as a
Mm-hmm.
for efficiency, making it easier so I don't have to work as hard, so I
Yeah.
can help more people. That's the way I think about it. How can I do more things, but still provide
Sure.
quality output?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And talking about the decisions, John, what accessibility decisions must always remain with humans?
Yeah, that's a good question. So certainly there's so if you look at some of the ethical AI blueprints that have been put out by Europe and Canada
Mm-hmm.
and in the previous White House in the US. Um, there are certain things that relate to privacy and personal identifiable information, emergency services, um, critical things like healthcare information or other other things like that are very sensitive. It's not to say that AI can't be used in those situations. I think it has tremendous power for healthcare and
Mm-hmm.
personal health, and also diagnosing things. There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it also has the potential, if it's incorrect, to have really dire consequences. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the checks and balances for certain situations need to be much stronger than they are for a lower risk situation where,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if the experience or the accessibility or whatever it is less than perfect, that's maybe tolerable in certain places,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not impacting a really important thing. But other places, it really requires a human to review, validate, approve, whatever it is, to double or triple check to make sure it's
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Sure, sure. And John, we always talk about human in the loop, but the advancements that we have seen in AI are overwhelming. Do you foresee a day where AI can truly understand a real user experience for a person with disability?
I think it's possible, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not today. We don't have that today. So, and I don't know when in the future that will be. I'm always amazed how fast
Mm-hmm.
AI is evolving and technology evolves. Um, but I believe that we will get to a point where it can do a lot more
Mm-hmm.
than we expect that it can. What degree though? In
Mm-hmm.
we're humans are individuals. We have individual needs and abilities and strengths, and we're not all probability that can just be put into a number. There's always differences, and so I would say it could get in the future. I think we will be able to understand that experience to a high degree, but not
Mm-hmm.
fully. I think to fully understand it, you have to have that human experience and all the
Mm-hmm.
things that make up you. And so that last whatever percent it is, 20% or whatever, still requires humans.
Sure.
But again, I don't know what the future will look like. But
Yeah.
but I do think there will be some degree
Mm-hmm.
of human experience that still is important in understanding that interface. But
Sure.
if we can get 80% of the way there, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
percent that is, then that'll really expand what we can do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe in the future, someone might be like an agent might be interviewing you instead of a human. Right, that
Yeah.
would be fascinating. John, we all know you are an invited expert for W3C who actually creates WCAG guidelines. And WCAG 3.0 is in the draft mode, and there are a lot of things that are you're currently working on. How do you see AI getting combined with WCAG 3.0?
Yeah. Yeah. So WCAG 3, and I can't speak for the group or the W3C, it's my personal opinion. WCAG is still a ways away. WCAG 3 is still a few years away. So there's still a
Mm-hmm.
lot to be determined. There's been a lot of progress made, but it's a big effort, and there's a lot of great group of people working on it. AI can be used in a few different ways. One, of course, be used in testing, which we've already covered some of that, and that can help speed up the effort and make some tests that were really difficult to do before. So previously we couldn't do certain things because testing them is too difficult, too time consuming. With AI, we may be able to test things that were difficult to test before. And so now we can introduce new things that are important to people with disabilities that just weren't practical to have in the guidelines before. So I think there's a possibility. So that's good. We might also be able to say that technology, including AI, if it was available, free, nominal cost, or whatever, available, could solve some of these issues rather than having the author having to solve every single issue themselves. So, in the number of criteria that have to be met on a number of pages is just, you find many people, most websites with thousands or millions of pages are going to have some issues somewhere in them. If AI could solve that issue and would be available to all the users automatically in their browser, for example, could something like that be acceptable? So could it be acceptable to have AI provided captions to meet a low bar, but then have human reviewed captions to meet another bar in the standards? And maybe the second bar is what's required by regulations, but the first bar is sort of a lower standard, and AI could meet that bar, whether, and it could be for captions, could be for audio descriptions, could be for something else. Those are things that are being looked at to see how AI could assist people in meeting the requirements to some degree, recognizing that humans will need to be intervening for some things for the near future. But how can we start reducing the effort needed by authors to allow them to focus on making more content accessible? It's a scale issue, because we don't want to discourage people from doing things that make things more accessible. Like if we just said, well, AI captions are bad, so you can't use them. If we just turned off AI captions, that would actually be more harmful. But if we allow people to just use AI captions and they don't identify the speaker properly, or they don't contain other critical information, especially in some situations like emergency or health or certain situations, then it could be problems. So how do we identify where AI can be used with a strong degree of confidence and be beneficial, but how do we then protect people with disabilities in those situations where it needs to be perfect? That is sort of what needs to be figured out.
Awesome. And you spoke about WCAG 3.0 is few years away from us, right? So how far are we looking at? Is it 2030 or is it beyond that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think somewhere in that range of 2 to 4 years is very likely. Assuming that something on the closer side of 2 years would still be, being worked on. But something in that range. We've always been saying 3 years, 5 years, and time is, we sort of unfortunately keep saying that because it is a complex standard, and we want the group wants to, and again I can't speak for them, but they create it in a way that is technology neutral, and it also is more evergreen. So it works with new technologies that we don't even know about today, that it would still be relevant with new technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, and immersive experiences, and different things. And so how you have to create something that is stands the test of time, but it also has to be something that's practical, that can be adopted by regulators, because if regulators don't adopt it, then it just becomes the best practice. And so it's a really nuanced balance with creating that. And so it is a very difficult job to do that.
Sure. And I can't even imagine how much effort it is taking from all the experts that are working with you, John. So we wish you all the best with that. One last piece of advice that you would love to give to our testers and developers who are worried about AI inaccessibility.
I I would say um, do what you can. Don't do what you can to improve and use technology to help you in your job and help people with disabilities. Like find don't be afraid to try out technology, learn from it, build new things, take it further, solve problems, get involved with the W3C and other
Mm-hmm.
groups, IAAP or other communities or whatever it is. Like get involved, solve problems, and I think that problem solving and helping other people and working together will help you create a good network of people. Will help you get your name out there. You'll be helping people with disabilities, and give you the experience. And maybe you can come up with new solutions that other people haven't thought of
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Sure, absolutely, John. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. The information that you have shared with us, John, is going to certainly calm a lot of nerves, the challenges that our testers and developers are facing today. So thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
Well, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for everyone who's listening and watching to this. I really appreciate you all, taking the time to do that and to learn and to be part of the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.